Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today we are shining a light on SmileSuite with our returning guest and my friend, Dr. Anthony Bonavoglia. Anthony and his company have been changing the game for orthodontists and their practices when it comes to the new patient acquisition and the process from contact to contract. Join us as we dive into the metrics that matter, the art of the new patient phone call, and a peek into the future developments from SmileSuite. Let's dive in. By now, we all know I talk to a lot of doctors and give advice to practices in every stage of their life cycle. And one question my docs ask all the time is, who do you recommend for marketing to attract more new patients from the internet? My answer? Easy. I have been recommending Mary Kay Miller and her team at Kaleidoscope for the better part of a decade. Why? They are thorough, professional, and transparent. Kaleidoscope Digital Marketing is who you want to talk to because they understand how to market in the orthodontic world and they offer tools that are affordable and easy to use. I'm telling you, if you're looking to step up your digital presence, Kaleidoscope should be your first call. Go to contactkl.com to request your free digital marketing consultation. That's contactkl.com. Anthony, I am so excited to have you on the show again.
Hi, Jill. Thanks for having me.
So as we jump in, just in the event that somebody maybe does not know who you are or about SmileSuite, can you give us just a really quick intro on that?
Yeah, thank you again for having me on. My name is Anthony Bonavoglia. I'm an orthodontist and the founder of SmileSuite. SmileSuite's the all-in-one new patient scheduling solution. The background of SmileSuite, we manage the new patient pipeline for practices. We have a remote team that handles our clients' new patient phone calls, responds to text messages, and we also promptly address web leads as they come in. And we concentrate on the pre and post consultation follow-up process. And we do that 7 days a week, days, nights, and weekends.
Which is what I love. So as you and I both know, orthodontists and their practices, I really think have been in the dark about guessing when's the busiest time in my practice for new patient phone calls and when patients are reaching out. And one of the things that I have really loved as we have worked together over the years, as SmileSuite has really come onto the market, is that you have been gathering some data for us so that we don't necessarily have to be in the dark about that anymore. So I'm wondering if you can dive into that a little bit, because I think that's what we all want to know. How busy is my practice? How are patients getting out there contacting us? What times are busier than others?
Yeah, I know this is something that every time you and I talk, you're always like, tell me the data, tell me the data. So I know this is one of those things that seems to get you up in the morning. Yeah. So yeah, we've been looking at it. And as we've been moving along and growing our business, we're getting more and more data coming in that gives us a better understanding of new patient process. I think some of the unique data that we have has to revolve around inbound phone calls, because I don't know that there's really anyone else in the orthodontic industry that really has aggregated as much data about new patient inbound phone calls as maybe we have. So one of the things that we get asked all the time is, when's the busiest time of the day, right? We all have our feeling about it, but never really being able to pin that down. We've looked at tens of thousands of new patient phone calls that have come in. And let me ask you this, Jill, what time do you think the busiest time of the day is for new patient phone calls for a practice?
I am going to bet that it's probably around a lunchtime and maybe towards the end of the day would be my guess.
Interesting. All right, lunchtime for sure. So the 12:30 to 2 is one of the hot times, but the busiest time is really 8:30 to 10 in the morning. Really? We find that is one of the busiest times that what we've seen with new patient phone calls. I have some feelings behind that as to why that is, but yeah, 8:30 to 10 and 12:30 to 2 tend to be the busiest times.
Yeah, interesting. And do you see that same data when it comes to when patients are reaching out in other ways?
We do. There's some different, it does vary a little bit depending on how they're reaching out. I would say, just as an aside, to just not just the time of day, but which day is the busiest day, right? If you want to boil it down even further, we definitely find that Monday mornings is the busiest
Yeah.
time. So that Monday, 8:30 to 10 o'clock block, that is the busiest time for new patient phone calls by and large. And what's interesting about that from a practice perspective, even looking at my practice, I have a fairly large solo doc practice. We have about 25 employees. And Monday mornings we come in and it's just a hectic time, especially for the scheduling coordinators. They have to come in, they have voicemails that they have to answer, text messages they have to get back to, emails. People are checking in at the front, and maybe Monday morning you're just getting going, and that's that's the worst time to have the largest number of or your highest percentage of new patient calls coming in. So it tends to be a strain on the scheduling coordinators. Again, but just interesting. That is I would say the hottest block of time.
No, which I think is really interesting because when I talk to my startup docs a lot, I say, if there's any day you could pick, and it doesn't always work out this way, but if there's any day that you could pick, if you only get 2 days to be in the practice a week, Mondays are definitely one that you ideally want to pick. Or at least you want to make sure that you've got a team member that's covering, or a third-party company like SmileSuite that's covering for us, because I have seen that as well. When your data just backs it up that Mondays are just exceptionally busy.
Yeah, it's for sure. And it's just busy all around. Mondays are just, And what's interesting too is, so in my practice, like I don't think I've ever worked a Friday. Like I have always taken Fridays off for the quality of life. I get 3-day weekends. And I've also just felt like that would maybe be the biggest no-show day. I didn't have anything to back that up, just inherently felt that way. And I also felt like from a new patient perspective, are people really calling on Fridays? I was actually looking at the month of March, planning on coming on here today just to see if I could get a perspective of how Fridays fare as far as new patient phone calls. And of the month of March, we had about 4,500 new patient phone calls come in. 18% of them came in on Fridays. So people are still calling on Fridays. Maybe our perception of a Friday being the first day of the weekend isn't everybody else's. But yeah, right across the board, about 18% of new patient phone calls for the month of March came in on a Friday.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me into just how we traditionally have done our orthodontic practices, and maybe our closed-minded thought in business only happens between 8 and 5. Patients are only going to be calling us 8 to 5. They're only going to want to communicate with us, and they'll wait to do business with us. And I think it's also really interesting to just see some of that data that I know you've been able to pull out on what we're seeing in the after hours and on the weekends. And I can even speak to, I had one of my clients that I was talking to, and they had recently brought SmileSuite on, and they were like, this is so awesome. I'm sitting there, because they also take Fridays off. And they're like, I'm sitting there and I just got a notification that I just had a new patient scheduled. And I think before the end of the weekend, they had 3 or something. And they were like, we had no idea. Like, we had no idea that we were missing them. And it was just a fun little high five moment. But can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's what makes it unique, is the fact that we know patients can reach out through email or through text. They may be reaching out, but they may not be getting anything back until we're back in the office again. But can you talk to us a little bit about that data and what you're seeing there?
Yeah, absolutely. What's funny about Fridays is you're talking about it. I'm thinking about, like I said, I've never worked a Friday. Maybe once I come in, I don't know. But, and I'm sure it's against my will. But what's so funny about it is, like, I inherently always think my patients know I'm not open on Fridays. My website says I'm not open on Fridays. People aren't going to call when I'm not open. My parents every week text me on a Friday and say, how was work today? I'm like, for 17 years, I haven't worked a Friday, and they can't remember. And I tell them every week. Now, maybe that says a little bit about them. I don't know. I think we do tend to get a little bit closed-minded in the sense that, like, everyone, we think everybody's thinking about us and what we've got set up. And that's probably not true. How many times do patients go to the front desk and say, what do you have a Friday? And you've been coming here for 2 years. Outside of just the normal business hours, even putting aside a 4-day work week, or I guess a lot of people go to 3-day work week, the question is, do patients try to schedule new patient appointments outside of that traditional 8 to 5 or 8:30 to 5? For certain practices that are doing a lot of marketing, you're going to see a lot of leads come in outside of traditional work hours. And that just makes sense, right? If somebody's working and you're targeting that that professional who is maybe interested in Invisalign, they're working, right? And they're not going to answer a lead during work hours. They're going to do it after hours. So we've seen some practices as high as 15-20% of their leads come in outside of working hours, specifically more in urban areas and if they're doing a lot of marketing. Typically, though, for a typical practice that isn't doing any sort of mass marketing or anything like that, you're going to see we see about 4.5 to 6% of new patient schedules come in after outside of hours. So not meaning they're scheduling outside hours, but they're calling or they're filling out a form online or something to that effect outside of traditional work hours. You can figure somewhere around 5-6%.
Yeah, which is, again, when we're looking at moving the needle, it isn't, and getting those new patient, that contact component taken care of and really connecting with the patient. If we can just move our needle by that 5% and then get them captured and get them into the practice, that's huge over a year's time. If you think about just capturing 5% more of the patients that you might not even have thought were contacting you, and you didn't even know were contacting you potentially. And I think that's one of the challenges that I always have for docs is you just don't know what you don't know unless you've got a way to track through your voice over IP or through your phone system how many phone calls are coming in, but how many phone calls are actually new patient phone calls coming in. You just don't know what you're missing. And that kind of leads me to even what I see with existing practices with the volume of calls that could come into a practice and really what that takes away sometimes, I think, from that patient experience. When you're a busy practice, we could talk about yours, big practice, but when you think about what your team members are doing in the day, just to deliver that patient experience that you have set up, and then you think about every time that phone rings, if they're not using a third-party company, there's like a 50-50 chance that they're going to get stuck on a phone call for X amount of time, and it's going to take away from the experience that you're wanting your patients to have when they come in. So I'm wondering a little bit if you can also talk about that, because I think we minimize what a quality new patient phone call looks like and what it actually takes, like the length of time and what it actually takes to gather that data.
Yeah, it's funny. So before SmileSuite was in my practice, we used to have a joke that when a phone call would come in and they didn't recognize the number, or I think we use Weave, so it pulls up the account and it wouldn't pull up an account, which meant it probably was a new patient. Everyone would put their finger on their nose because nobody wanted to take that call because it's going to chew up the scheduling coordinator's time to 6 to 8 minutes or whatever it was going to be, sometimes more. And it's a problem. It's a problem when people aren't enthusiastic. Look, as the owner of the practice, you're enthusiastic when every single time a new patient calls in. As the scheduling coordinator, no matter how much they might tell you they're happy about it, they're not, because they have other things that they have to be doing,
Sure.
and they're not planned. You don't get to pick when this new patient calls your practice. Mm-hmm. It happens whenever. Yeah, so typically we have found that the new patient phone call is going to be somewhere around 6.5 to 7 minutes. That's on average. That's the amount of time that it takes to qualify the patient. When we say qualify, we're talking about asking them those screening questions to make sure, are they the right candidate for your practice? Do they take the insurance that you're willing to accept? Have they been to the dentist? So all those sort of qualifying questions. It takes time, and it has to be done, we say, accurately with enthusiasm. You need to be enthusiastic about it, but you need to make sure it's accurate so you're not getting unqualified patients on your schedules, chewing up your new patient time. So it's time consuming, and you get a couple of them one after another. And next thing you know, what your scheduling coordinator had planned to do in the morning is now not getting done. And It's tough. It's tough to be able to plan for that.
Yeah. And I think especially in a lot of busier practices, we might not see this as much in our startups, but of course, we all want to catch that phone call. And I think one of the things that I've really appreciated as you have brought SmileSuite to the market is the fact that every call that comes in, your team is sitting there waiting to deliver a great new patient phone call, where a lot of times in our offices, we're just scrambling to answer the phone.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter if, and I have a lot of docs that have this rule, phone call has to be answered by the third ring or whatever. So that could mean the out of breath assistant that's running from the back to grab the phone call, and they don't have anything ready and they aren't prepared, and they maybe don't do this phone call very often. When you think about the quality of that call, maybe when you take that out over maybe 5 or 6 different people in the office potentially handling those calls, you've got to think, and I believe that can have a direct impact on whether patients sometimes even make it into the practice, because if that person who's running from the back to answer the phone to get the information, and then they got to put them on hold and go up front and have somebody schedule them, and it's pretty lackluster, I think, sometimes. Now, we captured the call, but did we deliver the experience that we wanted it? And I think that's been something that I have really appreciated, is that there is training and that there's consistency with those calls coming out of SmileSuite, and knowing that we've got team members, that's all that they do. They're just waiting to deliver a great patient experience.
Yeah, it's true. And again, my practice was no different prior to SmileSuite being around. And I do get some doctors that'll call me up and question SmileSuite and say, "Hey, how do I know they're delivering?" It's, well, for one, my practice is in there. I want to make sure we're doing a really good job. But you're right. That's just what we do. That's what they do all day long. And we do customize the scripting as well. If you're looking to maybe upsell something, or you say, "I don't want to take this insurance unless XYZ," we do all that. So we can customize the scripting so that it is consistent every single time. You're not missing anything during that qualification process. It is funny. We have in our office, we have a couple different criteria that people have to get through in order to be scheduled. They need to have seen the dentist or whatever it is. And every once in a while, we'll have somebody who came in and I'm like, "Okay, they haven't seen a dentist in over a year. I'm like, how did they get on the schedule?" And 100% of the time, it's because they came into the office to schedule the new patient exam and they talked to someone at the front desk. It's almost 100%. And here it is, like, my office knows better. That busy person who's scheduling their appointment missed it because they just weren't thinking about it, or they were doing it quickly. So I think that's one of the beauties of SmileSuite, is that, like, you are getting a consistent process based on your scheduling criteria, and we don't deviate from that. There is no sort of deviation from that process.
Yeah, I think that's great. So let's talk a little bit about, because I think this kind of leads into quality control. How do you manage it on the SmileSuite side, but also just in offices? If there's somebody out there who's listening, maybe I'm not quite ready to do this yet, or whatever, how do they manage that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. And for SmileSuite, we have agents that they cover from coast to coast, and we have Spanish speaking agents, and we're answering our calls and web leads around the clock. And we do monitor quite carefully, actually, through scorecards, how the call went. We have people who are actually one of their primary jobs is just to audit the phone calls that come in and listen to the call to make sure that it was enthusiastic, it was accurate, did we schedule them properly. So it's just real important to stay on top of things. I would advocate for anyone who's not necessarily using a service like ours, that even in your own practice, you're still monitoring those calls. Certainly routine calls, but more importantly, I would say new patient calls, to make sure they're delivering the service and the accuracy and the enthusiasm that you're looking for, and to use a scoring card to make sure that and I would do that once or twice a week. That would be my minimum recommendation.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know that's a tool that we use when we're consulting. We will do secret shopper calls, just to see what's going on with those new patient calls. And so I love that even within SmileSuite, within your own company, you're using that as well. I know that you had told me that you would be willing to share that with our listeners. So I believe what we're going to do is we're going to put that into the show notes at the end. So if anybody is listening and you're like, "Hey, that sounds like a great idea," besides just doing secret shopper calls, being able to really get in and, audit how those new patient calls are coming. And I'll put this out there for docs. If you're using some of the voice over IP companies that you may be using, listening, you've got recorded calls. You should be able to go in and listen to your team members' calls without them even knowing necessarily that you're doing that, and go through this audit, which again just helps us be better. These are all the things in business that aren't the fun, exciting things that, that we think of when we get into business, but the things that also help us really with the quality control. So anybody who's listening, we'll throw that into the show notes, and you can definitely click on that and download that. So thanks, Anthony, for including that with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I would say, sorry, just real quick on that, I would even just say you don't have to, as the doctor, be the one that does the scorecard. Just delegate it to somebody and just say, hey, twice a week, I want you to pull out a new patient phone call and just go through this scoring card and just give them a grade based on the criteria. And then you just proof it and just make sure it's where you want it to be.
Yeah, that's great. Hey docs, let's talk about consumer experience for a minute, specifically the kind of experience where you purchase an item or a service that you've been excited about only to be let down or disappointed by the actual product or experience. Not a good way to start a relationship. That's why relationships are so highly valued at GC Orthodontics, because they are truly dedicated to the orthodontic specialty. GC Orthodontics is a leading provider of TOMI orthodontic appliances, quality products that have serviced the orthodontic community for well over 50 years. They are focused on providing total solutions that include both digital and analog orthodontic treatment modalities, like brackets, indirect bonding, and clear aligners. It's time to build a long-term relationship with a company that is dedicated to delivering total solutions to your practice. Visit GC Orthodontics at www.gcamerica.com/Jill Allen and see why countless leading clinics have made the switch. Hey docs, let's talk about SmileSuite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud SmileSuite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. SmileSuite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with SmileSuite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence. So I want to shift gears just a little bit, and we touched on this for a second, but I would love to just hear what you are seeing and how patients are communicating with practices now, and what you're seeing as far as preferences and what that looks like.
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing that people are changing I guess the culture is just changing in general of people not wanting to make phone calls, not wanting to talk to people. It's a little strange to me, but okay, that's fine. We have in place, when a person fills out a web lead, we do offer the opportunity for that person to schedule through text messaging. So we looked through 6,200 web leads that got this option to either schedule through text message or phone call. Essentially, when they fill out the lead, they get a text message, hey, are you interested in scheduling through text? Would you like to do it through phone call? What we found is 27% of web leads would prefer to schedule through text messaging. So over a quarter. Interestingly enough, about 6.5% said phone, and the rest didn't type anything. So they get a phone call. Generally, we only give it I think we give it maybe 7 minutes for them to decide what they want to do. And then we call them 7 to 10 minutes. So within that 7 to 10 minutes, about over a quarter said they wanted to schedule through text message. Sorry. And if you're going to do this, and I do advocate that people start thinking about this, because again, it's a significant number of people that would prefer to not talk to somebody. You have to develop some sort of way of still qualifying the patient, right? I don't think it's enough to just send them a link and say, okay, schedule your appointment. We have, through our proprietary system, we still qualify based on the practice's questions that they want to ask. Again, what are you looking for? Making sure this is truly an orthodontic patient, insurance, all that kind of stuff. Making sure that's all HIPAA secure and all that. If you're going to go down the path of allowing people to schedule through text, you think about how that workflow is going to come together before you just jump onto that option.
Yeah. And I got to believe that we probably see this even more so when we've got practices that are really doing some heavy online marketing as well.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. They're wanting to respond to a lead through their phone. That means they want to finish out the experience on their phone. For practices that are doing more of the heavy marketing, yeah, it's going to be a more popular option.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about some of the big developments that are on the horizon for SmileSuite. What's next?
Yeah, so we recently released a do-it-yourself line. We have a fair number of practices. Yeah, we have a fair number of practices that said we want a way of streamlining the lead engagement. We want a way of managing the new patient pipeline. We're comfortable doing it ourselves. We just need something to bring it all together. So essentially what we've done is released our software to practices for the ability that if they're like, hey, I just want the dashboard to be able to manage the patient pipeline, so they can do it themselves. So that actually just got released this year. So it automates lead engagement. That includes pre and post consultation, keeping track of all your follow-ups for your treatment coordinators, also those sort of things. So that we're excited about. And we're going to be building on our analytics going forward. Where I'm focused on and where we're focused on is really honing in the difference between point of contact versus referral source. That's an important distinction. And if, let's say, a patient goes on your website and says, I'm interested in becoming a new patient, and then ask them, how did you hear about us? And they say, friend of who told me about your practice. The referral source should be friend, but the point of contact should be your website. And I think that's important when you're starting to think about where to allocate your dollars in your communication method. Do you have a chatbot on your page? Is that chatbot producing? Do you have a forum on your website? Is that producing? And then promoting those things in your marketing endeavors. So we're focusing in a little bit more on that because we do have that insight for our practices as far as where the leads are coming from. So that's something we're going to be developing and probably be out in the fall.
Oh, I love it. I love it. If somebody wants to get a hold of you or learn more about SmileSuite, where and how should they do that?
Yeah, so you can certainly go on our website, which is getsmilesuite.com. Also, our Facebook page, which we've recently revamped. And right now what we're doing is we're starting to post some of these metrics that we're able to share. And we're excited about it because then practices can benchmark against their weekly call volumes and those sort of things. So provide some insight into how the industry is doing. So I would definitely recommend people go on there and follow us on our Facebook page.
Yeah, that's great. So as we finish up, I do want to also say, I know you guys offer a little discount for anybody who's a Hey Docs listener. If you guys are out there and you're thinking, maybe this is something that I do want to do, or I want to find out more about my practice, be sure and mention Hey Docs as well. I know anybody who's worked with me, I'm always saying, save money where you can. Anthony, is having been on the show before, I like to finish us up with the speed round. So are you ready for the speed round challenge?
I am ready. Let's do it.
All right. Coffee or tea?
Both. In the morning, tea after lunch. Earl Grey.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were like an iced tea, like a black tea. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about, do you have a favorite podcast you've been listening to or like?
I do love Conan Needs a Friend. It's on SiriusXM. I just find him hysterical. I've always loved Conan since I was a kid. So that's where I'm on right now.
That's great. A favorite outdoor activity?
Skiing and tennis.
Oh, nice. All right. And if you could be remembered for one thing, what would that be?
I think professionally, I'd like to be remembered as making a difference in our industry as I come through, being able to make a mark. I think personally, I'd like to be remembered as being able to maintain the right balance between work and family life.
That's a great one. And then the best piece of advice you've ever received?
There was a doctor who taught at a VA locally here where I live and practice. And one time he gave advice to his residents, and I thought, oh man, that was and it has just stuck with me. I thought it was great. He said, you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. Neither last. For me, it meant don't get too high, don't get too low. We tend to put a lot of focus on the really good days and think this is how it's going to be every day, and that's a mistake. And we tend to get too focused on the bad days for the same reason. And I think just staying in the middle is the sweet spot. So for me, that was a really impactful piece of advice.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. And I think we definitely need to hear that sometimes because you're exactly right. You can be on the mountain and in the valley and the
Same week, same day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anthony, thank you so much for once again joining us and giving us some great data to think about and new information. And as always, I love having you as a friend and just want to thank you again for being on the show.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yep. All right. Until next time.